And so I step back because I'm watching the carnage. But I'm also not preoccupied with getting too emotional about it. Do you understand? Because it has to take place. But I just wish that a lot of people wouldn't have to suffer so much. But it's necessary.
But think about this.
But they chose it also.
That's true. But have to consider that in the choice, we chose to be incarnated in a time where most of our ancestors, a lot of our ancestors were always in between, never seeing as the so-called scripture.
You can say foot in two camps.
Right. Moses allegedly was able to look over at, but not go into.
Yeah.
Here we are, a lot of us moving from one, as we're talking about, an age, the Piscean age, into the Aquarian age, moving into that and actually seeing what has been and getting a strong taste of what will be at the same time as we're walking into it. So that was a choice that we made. And unfortunately, people are not indoctrinated in the fact that there was a choice, that there was a decision made to incarnate.
Yes.
There was a choice of who mommy and daddy would.
You asked. You got a contract.
Yes, right. So we made an agreement that we have soul contracts with soul group members and antagonists and protagonists, and of those who were playing various parts in our life by choice.
And some of us traded places with others prior.
Absolutely. So we and some of us have played in other
venues.
Times we've been the opposite of what we were then. So not knowing these, we feel like victims or victors when we're just actors.
Because everything is acting. See, because it's both a prison, a storehouse, a repair shop. And you got to look at it that way too. Because that's not just an opinion, that's a fact. And then the other, again, like I said earlier, people need to understand that there's has been, and it's less so only because of interference, but others who are competing for this resource and wanting to sacrifice us while doing it. That has been interrupted. And so some of that reflects into the politics of the Democratic Party, i.e. the Ku Klux Klan, and much of their operations have been interrupted. This is why you see them doing this Antifa thing around the country, destroying targeted neighborhoods in the name of helping certain people, which they're really trying to rebury them. But because they don't understand the language forms, they don't know that it's actually a curse operation. They think it's a beneficial operation. However, like we said before, you can't argue with them because they're passionately defending those codes, those black codes. So therefore, nature will allow them to experience some experiences so that they can learn that that was a misjudgment, a miscalculation, a mischoice, as you say. Because basically, a lot of times we say, but I think it can be honestly said that humans don't make so many mistakes as they claim. They make mischoices. And then claim it to be a mistake when they don't get to what they wanted. Or how do you say, less than honorable intentions doesn't turn out the way they want it. And so they say it's a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was a mischoice.
Let's see. Get some questions. Will Ramirez Bay, what is choose disincarnation? That really means that you made a choice to be reborn
now.
Into a certain time, and we were born multiple times. We're reborn. We have multiple lifetimes, so we make choices. That's what it means when you talk about choosing.
Yeah, what we talked about years ago, Dr. Naila. Some of them. There's a handful of many who came back to help that really don't need to recycle. They run their course. You know, some have stuck around because of their selfishness, which have been a problem for all of us. There's a clash between them and some of the helpers. And some of the helpers, people like to give them all kinds of titles, but I don't like to go into title stuff. The numbers are strong now, unlike before. In some cycles, in some cycle placements, there were some that were strong, but they were few and they would kill them off. And that allowed them to get a lot of things done for quite some time. However, this time they've been flooded.
We have a lot of crystal children.
Yes, they've been flooded.
There's a lot of different,
and so they can't,
and so forth to come in.
And so they can't get rid of it. This is another thing why they're upset. And this is also why they're accelerating throwing sicknesses on humanity. They're angry. Some of them are angry. Some of them are scared. Some of them are angry because some of the hybrids feel like they have a right to do with humanity no different than a shepherd does with the sheep. Steal the wool, then eat the flesh. They actually feel that way, and they're angry because they're recognizing it's been interfered with to a degree that they don't have the power that they used to have, and that with all the technology and some of the tools that they've had and been able to use has been interrupted with. The same way, put it this way, the best way to explain it is the bishopric's attitude in the unum sanctum doctrine is where the rooted of their attitude is. That's a true reflection of the hybrid operations on the planet. So when they're looking at the contemporary, not the old, but the contemporary popes of Rome, the mental of most of these people is thinking from the concept of religion, the way it's been told to them, of the study of good and evil type thing, and good holy men and women going around making statements. Well, to be honest with you, that's the wrong view altogether. These people are not what you think they are. They are not altogether evil the way you look at it, but they're totally parasitic. And in their relationship with humanity, their relationship is entirely parasitic, having nothing to do with spiritual development in the concept that the people have been told religion is. And it's not a condemnation. That's what it actually is.
I actually have a book down there of a minister, priest, whatever he was, that went to, I don't know whether it was Harvard or one of the theological, schools of theology. And he went in with faith. And by the time he had finished and graduated, he had graduated with his degree in theology. He gave up on it because he found out that it was just a profession. They can say, what's your profession? Because they teach them one thing, truth, and then tell them to tell the people something entirely different. So when they give them because it's not at all. See, to put it bluntly, and this is not with condemning people who participate in these different organizations. From the position of the bishopric order and the Roman Curia, and the Roman Curia and the bishopric order is at the head of the so-called religious orders on the planet. From their position, it is totally for controlling humanity with no real sincere compassion. It's not done from a position of compassion. It's done from a position of efficiency. And
No different than they sacrifice lambs, so it is with humanity. The poverty suffered on humanity is entirely, I repeat, the poverty suffered upon humanity on Midgard is entirely artificial. Entirely artificial. They're angry because it's been interfered with. Now, because humanity has been groomed to the fiat system as money, I repeat, fiat system as money. It's not money. Fiat system as money. You got to look at it in perspective, because if you don't look at it into perspective, it gets muddied again. Is absolutely a tool. And so much of the poverty operations is strong because the people believe in it. They believe they have money. They believe that they've had money. They believe that they've been paid, when in fact, none of that is true. They believe that they were told that they take these instruments and they spend them. And they're in that groom. And this is, that area is where it's difficult to awaken some of them to the reality to let it go, because they don't want to let it go, not knowing that that is the slavery that they were called, that they've been telling is slavery, and that the resources that they're seeking to acquire use of or shared value with is available to them without that system. This is where the power of the priesthood is that they've placed their private commercial paper between the truth of life and the beings in life, that they can't see. The plants out there never required that private commercial paper, which isn't money, which is what they were told was money. And they've been groomed to that, which is why without the Job, they think that none of these resources are available to them. They don't know that the resources belong to them. This is back to people really not understanding estate, or even the issue what Judicial was talking about, the lost estate. They're looking at birth certificates and stuff like that. The view is totally wrong.
Question here, Delicious says, who are the doctors of the law? I know you say that all the time. I know what
doctors of the law.
Doctors of the law. You know, a lot of times you said they were doctoring the law.
Yeah. The doctors of the law is essentially the priesthood, essentially. You know, like when you see the anthropomorphic Jesus at the age of 12, going down to the temples and disputing with the doctors of the law. The doctors of law, and as a matter of fact, that is an ongoing title in society, a doctor of law. You know, PhD is a doctor of law. LLD is a doctor of law.
I got a PhD.
You know, where you're dealing with ecclesiastic or you're dealing with civil.
Yes,
all doctors of law. And what it essentially means on another, because remember, the doctor is a contemporary term that is actually used in place.
Like Pharisees.
Yeah, is actually used in place, you know, of the Gnostics, you know, or the Nagas, you know, and we're not talking about Nagas where they'll talk about different African people in different part of Asia as a people, but it's actually more or less a state of being, or state of cognizance, or state of connection with nature and life itself, or from which you get what you call your high priesthood. And we're not talking like from a negative or positive, but just simply the cognizance of the workings of nature. You know, so that is what they've done. If they've taken our magic and our powers, and then they've added doctor to it in your modern times. And this is why you got PhD, no matter what the science or discipline, when they master it, or they come to the master's degree, they have a PhD, whether it's engineering, whether it's ecclesiastics, whether it's chemistry, whether it's engineering. And so the average person doesn't notice that the PhD applies to all of them. So it means doctor of philosophy. No, what it really means is Gnostic. You see? But once you understand that, and so even when you understand why all these different orders have adept chambers, they're masters, at least on a degree of the chambers of the physical agencies. But in fact, in harmony with nature, actually adepts are born and not made. And it's the artificial operations of them making these titles and giving them to people undeserving that didn't come from the womb of woman that has contaminated much of society. So you actually have what you call artificial constructed societies that collapse by virtue of them ignoring divinity, because the divinity is that all of the adepts and women bring them cognitely. They're born, they're not made.
There's a question about your take on buying land, and there's some discussion about you can't buy land.
We all know that.
And somebody else said you can't if you pay taxes.
Can't buy it anyway.
Yeah, if you pay taxes on it or something, you don't own it. So
yeah, so that now we're back to a hypothecation, aren't we?
Right.
How for the people at large, hypothecation. Hypothecation is whereas a person, an organized group, an agency of persons, by legal construct, create a bond claim on either land or property or hereditament, corporal or incorporeal, and make a claim, registered claim on that either by way of that instrumentality on land, estate, inheritances, etc., while not physically possessing it, yet legally controlling it, and creating other instrumentality related to that land or trust or estate, and then selling that instrument, and thus actually buying and selling the estate, however, not actually selling or transferring ownership, etc. And so this is where you get also legal terms like fee simple, etc., and other terms. So get familiar with them and understand, according to Moorish law anyway, you can't sell the land anyway. And this is another fraud when hybrid Europeans have written in history that some of these Moors, some of the Mohican Moors, and some of the Renapis, particularly in Shakyabi territory, etc., and then Shekyabi territory, etc., and in Amsterdam area, that they sold Manhattan for a string of beads, which is a lie, because you can't sell it any daggone way. And in the Moorish culture, you can't do anything in relationship to the land, resources, etc., without a concerted consideration before the circle of mothers, before transfer to the sons, for 7 generations down. And that's always been the customs and traditions, and you can't sell it anyway. So anything they're telling you about selling the land is lying.
Trade Base says, how do we reestablish our government now that the de facto occupiers are falling from power?
Cognates is what you're doing right now. As a matter of fact, everything that we've been doing in the name of, although not limited to, but in the principle of, those principles brought back to our cognizance by Noble Drew Ali with the restoration of the Moorish estate via the Moorish Divine and National Movement of the world. And that's not religion. That is a reclamation of the lost estate. That principle is not just with us, it's on the planet. with all of the kingdoms, etc., many of which you know now are nation states, but many of the rulers know many of those so-called nation states are part of the provinces of Fez, part of the provinces of the Moroccan Empire, including the whole so-called Louisiana Purchase, which is a fraud, etc., what they call Little Spain, etc. That whole area is Algiers. Get used to it. And so when you see that crescent upside down with the star, you're not talking about just Algiers on the northern coast of South Asia that you call Africa today. You're talking right here at North America in the Gulf of Mexico, New Orleans, right on up through the Mississippi, right on up to just below Canaan land area right now, up the Mexican, etc. area and the Great Lakes. You got Algiers. There you go. So get your head straight and start looking at things differently, and understand as you start thinking differently, the hybrids will start acting differently because of your consciousness, not because they're trying to act right. Because your consciousness is actually kills the darkness. And it also wakes up your DNA. And so a lot of times we tell people over the years, a lot of things that you're doing today, you will not be doing later. The reason we're telling you that is because these are necessary exercise for your evolutionary development, because you're getting ready to get jumped a few times. When I say jumped a few times, it means that you're simply being prepared, no different than somebody, how do you say, putting a sock on before they throw a shoe on you type thing. So don't get impressed because you're not going to be walking around in your socks necessarily. Not that you can't. So a lot of what you're doing politically and socially right now is pretty much more exercise, because most of the stuff is going to be tossed. But it's necessary for you to get certain jobs done and to prepare you for other evolutionary stages, which you're going to be not rushed to, but in the view of those who have been measuring things by time cycle, it's going to seem to be speeded up. And so for you to be able to handle a lot of what you're going to be exposed to, you understand that certain technologies are not going to be shown to you. You will be given a product absent of the knowledge of the technology, just to jump your head a little bit. And then you're going to get a series of jumps. So a lot of things that you're used to now, or that you've been prepared for mentally or educationally, is simply dead meat. So, and it doesn't mean ignore those things, but understand you're going to be jumped exponentially.
Trey Bay said, how do we fight the obfuscated claims on land masses, properties, etc., without being incarcerated?
You're doing some of these things for learning, but understand all the effort that you're making right now is good, but it's not even going to be necessary, because a lot of stuff's going to be dropped in your lap. What you need to do is learn self-government. Because remember, a lot of systems that were set up to steal your birthright is really why you're seeking psychologically to buy back your estate, which is not going to happen. However, go through the exercise. You know, you're getting into the mental part of the lower level mental that's necessary for you to recognize that this doesn't belong to them. That's what more this is for. You ain't buying nothing. You're going to claim what's yours.
See, Mag N3 has posted this like the same thing several times, so I'm assuming he wants to, and I know a little bit about this. City of Rockwell, Texas, Dallas suburb, sits on a 10 by 10 square model 25-foot wall, quote unquote, discovered in mid 1800. I happen to know something about that because I saw a whole documentary on it where it was discovered by some farmers that allegedly owned the land. And they brought in just recently this, I can't even think of the guy. He's on God, what channel is that? Like Discovery Channel or something. He's a geologist. And they went back in. The guy who owns the land where it is on now has a company with the backhoe. They do excavations, and they re-excavated it. And when they did the testing, they did bore samples on it. The city's named after this Rockwall, Texas.
Yeah.
But when they did the bore samples on it, they found that they were consistent with a natural formation, even though it looks like it may have been carved. They said, according to the several bore samples that were taken of the rock wall, that it was not created by some ancient civilization, but it literally is they said, because I watched the whole thing, a natural
geographic anomaly
and geological anomaly. So I think the thought was, up until it was confirmed through
that it was constructed by ancient ones or something.
Yeah, that because there's something that happens, you would be able to see it all the way through the borings. There would be some shifting and different things if they were different rocks placed on, in whatever. But whatever the boring and the testing that they did, they determined that while it's a beautiful formation, it is actually naturally formed, and it wasn't created by.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, Rockwall. Yeah, I just looked at this like a couple weeks ago. That's why it's fresh in my mind. So, but I'm not sure.
But also, if it were not, understand that the technologies was more advanced than even what that would be admitted to. So it's not a either or. It's not a matter if it's natural, because the technology for it to have been done already existed anyway.
Yeah, and it could be that it was created and they just don't realize.
They don't want to acknowledge it, because remember, this is another thing. Keep in mind, like some of the minings that take place in land of the Virgin Mary, that would be Maryland, Virginia area. So code in the Bible, that's really that area.
Really?
Virgin Mary, yeah. So is Alexander the Great. So that's why Alexandria with the obelisk. You got to understand what you're looking at. See, this whole God game that they've been controlling humanity with, the way they've been presenting the God game, the monotheistic God game, that is never specifically named. Notice how the monotheistic presentment is just the word God, when the word God is a position or title or a latent action or verb transitive and not a being, yet that's not discussed. When actually the different energies are the gods, collective energies, or the knowledge of it is called God. That is the monotheistic presentment that they don't tell the people that that's what that is.
But if one would only think about the declaration allegedly that God said, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," would suggest that there are other gods to possibly have.
So is it the people saying it, or is it the so-called God?
The so-called God saying it.
Now you see the contradiction on the game that's played on humanity.
But a lot of this stuff was read to people, and they weren't looking at it themselves.
They're not looking at what they're being told.
They're not even listening yet.
Which is an admission of what? Competing energies.
Absolutely.
Not from your opinion being a sinner as they play, or not for you disrespecting. That's coming from the energy itself, telling you, I don't want no competition.
Right.
Well, I mean, I didn't know you had one until you told me.
Now I might have to take them out.
Yeah, if you get the whole point. Yeah. So
here's another question. I was told a judge cannot sit on a bench because he is a citizen. Why is that, and where can I find it in writing?
All right, now this is back to what we just read earlier. United States Corporation Company having judges, Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States is a creature of that Constitution and the treaties. If it's not a creature of that Constitution, it's not a judge, administrative clerk. So that's number one. And first thing you want to do is, while we make references to people holding titles in political systems, we must need to teach civics. This is back to civics, what you were talking about earlier, and why they don't teach civics. Is because people have been taking these imposters as being who they are not, without either questioning or even examining whether they fit the mold or the creature construct of what that position is. There's been no lawful judges operating on the land in North America. You know the paper I just gave you? Mm-hmm. There we go. Make sure that that person who asked that question gets that paper.
Yeah, well, it's actually on the flash drive, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a conversation with some yesterday with a group that's from the Atlanta area, from Georgia, and I found out the sister was sharing with me that and here's this Georgia amendment to allow residents to seek declaratory relief from certain laws amendments. A quote unquote yes vote supported waiving the state's sovereign immunity and allowing something residents to, what the question was, that here was this thing on the ballot that most of the people in Georgia didn't even know what that meant, that it hadn't been widely discussed, and if it was, maybe came up in council meetings, but not everybody goes to city council meetings.
Not just that, they didn't make it public in the first place.
And then these people in Georgia, it was approved, because at the time she didn't know it, but I'm looking at it, it was approved, and a yes vote supported waiving the state's sovereign immunity and allowing residents to seek declaratory relief from state or local laws that violate the Constitution of Georgia, the U.S. Constitution, or state law. A no vote opposed waiving the state's sovereign immunity, thereby continue. Maybe it was a good thing, I don't know. Continue to prohibit
on the surface, yeah,
to prohibit residents from seeking declaratory relief from state or local laws that violate the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, or state law. But the problem was nobody really knew what that meant. Not a lot of people knew whether they should say yes or no. But
as you mentioned earlier, you know, as far as curriculum is concerned, Gates Foundation would not fund school systems that taught civics.
True.
Which these questions should be what you would call commonly comprehended, meaning that, and let's make this very clear, any person that holds a judicial office under the jurisdiction of the United States, i.e., must be sanctioned by virtue of what is called Supremacy Clause oath of affirmation and support for the Constitution, which would include the treaties, etc. And therefore, the holder of that office must be an Article 3 judge and a creature of that Constitution. Now, you have all these people, men and women, running around working for private foreign corporations, raping the people, taxing the people, fining the people, imprisoning the people under a total and absolute color of office and a total and absolute color of authority. Now, that's a fact. And so anyone that's operating on this land in the name of judge, if they haven't stated for the record they're Article 3, and they're not anyway, because the U.S. corporation has been dissolved since 1861, you see where we are with this, Dr. Naila? And this is redundant. A lot of the things we talk about is redundant, and you'll hear some people say, oh, they told us that before. Does it dawn on them what they've been told? Have they integrated that knowledge into their operations? If they had, guess what wouldn't be happening right now? They would not be running around voting for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, matters not who either one of those guys are. But the Republic would have been restored, i.e., the people would have reclaimed their birthright and would have been exercising it as a norm and recognizing that it ain't got nothing to do with some religion or how you feel, that the people themselves are in a political venue representative of the republic. It is the people themselves. And it ain't no damn vote. It's a plebiscite.
Yeah.
The concepts are just totally wrong. But we got to keep on banging while the dark priesthood is trying to kill them off. Well, I put it this way: we're trying to awaken the people to get active while he's trying to kill them,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to vote for him. Do you get the point? Yeah. They're worrying about voting for their killers. They're killers and robbers. Mm.
It's just interesting. There's just a lot of things, but good, bad, or indifferent. When you don't know what to do and you're over there, pushing buttons, you don't know what decision, you don't know what you're doing.
What or who or why?
Yeah.
That's what I tell the people. Look, without making any personal judgments, right, on personality. Donald Trump, although he's running on the Republican Party, is not really a Republican. He's somewhat a reformist, and he's also what you would call a negotiator for the bankrupt corporation, which is actually why he's placed there. He's assigned. But anyway, the Republican Party is the Cottonwigs. Tell the people to look that up and understand what that's dealing with. And the Democratic Party is the Ku Klux Klan and Cottonwigs. And that's what that is. Tell them to research that much and get a little bit more aware so they can have some concept of what they're dealing with. That's for starters. Now, voting for them one way or another. So if you vote for them, that means you agree to be their stock. There's no other relationship other than that. Then they create a bond on that person, and then they sell it.
So the Democrat
is the Ku Klux Klan and the Cottonwigs.
Okay.
And that's a fact. And the Republican Party is the conscience wigs. And operatively, in your modern era, they're flip sides of the same coin. And most of their opposition with each other is for public consumption. And in reality, they all are together raping the people, sending their children to private schools, got the best of medical care and everything, and are entrenched parasites at the expense of the people.